We're in Washington, March 3rd, 2015. It is 8:30 in the evening. Benjamin Netanyahu enters the chamber of the United States House of Representatives. He was invited by the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, without consulting the White House. Barack Obama refuses to meet with him. More than 50 Democratic members of Congress are boycotting the session. It is the most controversial visit by a foreign head of government in decades. Netanyahu does not care. He has come for a specific reason, and he has brought something with him. He steps up to the podium. The room is full. The cameras of the entire world are trained on him. He begins to speak, and after a few minutes, he pulls something from his jacket. A book. Not an intelligence report, not a satellite photograph of a nuclear site, not a map of Iranian ballistic capabilities. A book of the Bible, the book of Esther. He raises it before the cameras and says this, word for word. Tomorrow night, on the Jewish holiday of Purim, we'll read the book of Esther. We'll read of a powerful Persian viceroy named Haman, who plotted to destroy the Jewish people some 2,500 years ago. Today, the Jewish people face another attempt by yet another Persian potentate to destroy us. The room rises to its feet. 43 standing ovations. 43. This speech will be seen by tens of millions of people. It will be analyzed, commented on, quoted for years. It will enter history as one of the most striking addresses ever delivered before the United States Congress. And its central message, the Persians have wanted to destroy the Jews for 2,500 years. This hatred is religious. It is ancient. It is inscribed in the texts. This message will be repeated, amplified, taken up by thousands of journalists, editorialists, and experts on every channel in the world. But here is what Netanyahu did not say that evening. The book of Esther he held in his hand. That precise book, those precise 12 chapters, tells the story of a Persian king who saves the Jews. And the prophet Isaiah, in the Hebrew Bible, grants a Persian king a title no foreigner has ever received in the entire history of the sacred Jewish texts. He calls him Messiah. Tonight, we are going to read what the Bible actually says about Persia, about Iran, about 2,500 years of a history that someone decided to rewrite. And we are going to understand how a 31-year alliance between Israel and Iran was transformed over 46 years into eternal hatred. The truth is not the one you were given, and it begins here. You know this story. You have seen it on every screen for years. Iran funds Hamas. Iran funds Hezbollah. Iran funds the Houthis in Yemen. Khamenei calls Israel a cancerous tumor that must be eradicated. Ballistic missiles are fired at cities. Generals are assassinated in their offices. An open war that in 2025 crossed a threshold that 45 years of hostility had never dared to cross. And behind all of it, a narrative. A simple, coherent narrative, repeated until it became self-evident. The Persians and the Jews have hated each other since antiquity. This hatred is religious. It is deep. It is ancient. It is, at its core, inevitable. This narrative is powerful because it seems logical, because today's facts appear to confirm it, because everyone repeats it: journalists, experts, leaders. But here's the question that no one truly asks. Have you ever read what the Bible says about Persia? Not what you were told it says, what it actually says. Because if you have read it, you know that something does not add up. And if you have not read it, tonight you are going to understand why someone preferred that you never did. We are in October 539 before our era. Babylon. The city is the largest in the known world. Its walls stand 25 meters high. The Euphrates runs through its center. Its hanging gardens defy the imagination of travelers who come from afar to behold them. Nebuchadnezzar has built there an empire that no one believes it possible to overthrow. And yet, on that night, something extraordinary happens. A Persian general named Cyrus diverts the waters of the Euphrates upstream from the city. The river level drops. His soldiers advance through the nearly dry riverbed, passing under the walls through the water gates that no one had thought to guard. Inside, the Babylonian king Belshazzar feasts with his nobles. The Babylonian chronicles themselves confirm it. The city falls in a single night, without bloodshed. The following morning, Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, enters Babylon as a conqueror. What happens next will change the history of the world. Because Cyrus does not do what conquerors do. He does not destroy. He does not deport. He does not massacre. He does exactly the opposite. He issues a decree engraved on a clay cylinder 23 centimeters long, today on display at the British Museum in London. And this decree says something the world had never heard from a conqueror. Religious freedom for all the peoples of the empire. The right of every deported people to return to their homeland. The restitution of confiscated sacred statues. The rebuilding of destroyed temples. The abolition of forced labor. In 1971, the United Nations had this cylinder translated into all its official languages. It declared it the first charter of human rights in human history. A copy stands today at United Nations headquarters in New York. But for the Jews held captive in Babylon for 50 years, Cyrus's decree represents something more immediate, more visceral than any legal document. It represents the end of exile, the right to return home, the right to rebuild their temple. Cyrus goes even further. He personally restores the sacred treasures that Nebuchadnezzar had pillaged from Jerusalem. Golden cups, silver basins, ritual knives, objects the Jewish priests had believed lost forever. And this is where we must stop, truly stop. Because what the prophet Isaiah writes about Cyrus in the Hebrew Bible is without precedent in the entire history of the sacred texts. Isaiah, in chapter 44, verse 28, calls Cyrus my shepherd. And in chapter 45, verse 1, that precise verse, that unique verse, he writes this: "Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus." His anointed. In Hebrew, mashiah, Messiah. Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, conqueror of Babylon, a man who never prayed to the God of Israel, who never set foot in Jerusalem, who worshipped Marduk and Ahura Mazda. This man is the only foreigner, the only non-Israelite in the entire Hebrew Bible to receive this title. Not a king of Israel, not a Jewish prophet, a Persian. Let that idea settle for a moment. For centuries, millions of people have heard the word Messiah and thought of someone who belongs to the Jewish tradition, someone from the inside, someone who shares the faith, the language, the history. And yet, the first time the Hebrew Bible uses this title for a named individual, not in an abstract way, not symbolically, but explicitly, with a proper name, it is to designate a Persian king, a man whose ancestors today occupy the territory of Iran. Isaiah goes even further. He says of Cyrus, in verse 4 of the same chapter, "I have called you by your name. I have given you a title, though you did not know me." God himself acknowledges that Cyrus does not know him. He is not a believer in the Jewish sense of the term. And yet, and this is where the vertigo sets in, this ignorance takes nothing away from his mission. God uses a man who does not believe in him to accomplish what no believer had been able to accomplish. Modern scholars have debated for decades the precise dating of this passage in Isaiah. Some believe it was written before Cyrus, which would make it a remarkable prophecy. Others, and this is the dominant consensus in contemporary biblical studies, believe it was written during the exile, perhaps even after Cyrus's first acts, by an author who saw in this Persian king the hand of his God at work in history. In either case, the conclusion is the same, and it is unsparing. For the Hebrew Bible, a Persian is a savior, not a threat. Not an enemy, a savior. Flavius Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, recounts something fascinating in his Jewish Antiquities. According to him, when Cyrus conquered Babylon, Jewish priests showed him the prophecies of Isaiah that designated him by name. And Cyrus, upon reading these texts that named him centuries before his birth, was seized with an ardent desire to accomplish what was written. This account may be legendary, but it says something true about how the Jews of antiquity saw this Persian king, not as a benevolent foreigner, but as someone who in some sense belonged to them, someone whom history had designated for them. The tomb of Cyrus still stands today. It is located at Pasargadae in the Fars province in southwestern Iran. Iranians venerate it. It is part of their national heritage. And the Jews of Iran, we will return to them, know it too. Two peoples, one tomb, and between them, 2,500 years of a history that someone decided to erase. But here's the question that no one ever asks. How did this people the Bible called a savior, this people whose king is the only foreigner in all of Hebrew scripture to bear the title of Messiah, how did this people become the Iran we see on our screens today? This country whose supreme leader calls Israel a tumor to be eradicated. This country that funds militias, fires missiles, and swears the destruction of a state. To understand today's war, we must understand who the Persians truly are. Not the regime, the people, the civilization, the long history. Because Iran has not always existed under that name. And this change of name, discreet, almost administrative in appearance, conceals one of the most astonishing revelations in this entire story. Let us go back, far back. After Cyrus, Persia does not stop. It grows, it expands. Darius I builds Persepolis, a palatial capital of such grandeur that Greek historians themselves are lost for words. Columns 20 meters high, carved reliefs representing delegations from 23 nations come to pay tribute. An empire stretching from Egypt to India, from Ethiopia to Central Asia, the largest empire the ancient world had ever known. Xerxes, son of Darius, invades Greece. Thermopylae, Salamis, battles that the Greeks told as the victory of civilization over barbarism. But history is always written by those who hold the pen, and the Greeks held the pen. What they said less about is that the Persian Empire, at that time, was infinitely more tolerant, infinitely more diverse, infinitely more sophisticated than the Greek city-states that had been warring among themselves for generations. Then comes Alexander, 330 before our era. The Macedonian crosses the Hellespont with 40,000 men and overthrows in a few years what the Achaemenids had built over 2 centuries. Persepolis burns. The empire collapses. But here is what is fascinating. Alexander himself is captivated. He marries a Persian princess, Roxana. He adopts the customs of the Achaemenid court. He has himself depicted with the insignia of Persian kings. His generals do the same. They marry Persian women in a collective ceremony at Susa. Alexander's empire is less a Greek conquest of Persia than a fusion, unequal, violent at the outset, but real, between 2 worlds. And when Alexander dies prematurely at 32, in 323 before our era, and his generals fight over his territories, Persia does not disappear. It waits. The Parthians arrive, an Iranian people from the Khorasan region at the border of present-day Iran and Turkmenistan. They reclaim control of Iran in 247 before our era and hold Rome at bay for 4 centuries. 4 centuries. While Rome conquers Gaul, Spain, Britain, and North Africa, the Parthians maintain a stable frontier east of the Euphrates. Neither Rome nor the Parthians manage to destroy the other. It is a balance of power that modern history would call geopolitical stability. Then the Sasanians, in 224 of our era. A new Iranian dynasty, even more conscious of its Achaemenid heritage. They explicitly proclaim themselves the heirs of Cyrus and Darius. They build Ctesiphon, their capital, not far from present-day Baghdad. They develop a brilliant civilization, architecture, astronomy, medicine, philosophy. They are Byzantiums, great rivals for 4 centuries. And throughout all of this history, one constant: the Persian language, Farsi. Despite the Greek conquests, despite the Parthian administration, despite the empires that succeed one another, the Persian language survives. It enriches itself, it borrows, it evolves, but it does not die. That is rare, extraordinarily rare. Dozens of languages have vanished under the pressure of empires. Persian traverses the centuries. Then, 651 of our era. The Arab conquest. Muslim armies sweep over the Sasanian Persian Empire, weakened by decades of wars against Byzantium. The Battle of Nahavand, which Iranians still call today the defeat of defeats. The Sasanian Empire collapses in a matter of years. Islam arrives. And for the first time in millennia, Persia loses its state religion, Zoroastrianism, that ancient Iranian faith that believed in a single God, Ahura Mazda, long before Abraham, long before Moses. Many expected Persia to disappear, as so many other civilizations had before it. That Arabic would replace Persian, that Iranian identity would dissolve into the Muslim Ummah. That is not what happened. Persia did something remarkable. It absorbed Islam and transformed it from within. The great flowering of medieval Islamic civilization, mathematics, poetry, philosophy, medicine, architecture, is to a large extent a Persian flowering. Avicenna is Iranian, Al-Biruni is Iranian, Omar Khayyam is Iranian. Ferdowsi, who saved the Persian language by writing the Shahnameh, the Iranian national epic of 60,000 verses, is Iranian. Persian not only survives the Arab conquest, it becomes, for centuries, the language of culture and diplomacy throughout the Islamic world, from India to Anatolia, from the Mughal courts of Delhi to the Ottoman sultans of Istanbul. Then come the Mongols, Genghis Khan, then Tamerlane, destruction of unimaginable violence. But Persian civilization, once again, absorbs and survives. The Mongol Khans end up adopting Islam and Persian. And then something happens that will lead us directly to the Iran-Israel question. In 1501, the Safavids take power in Iran and make a decision that will change the history of the entire Middle East. They impose Shia Islam as the state religion, not merely as a spiritual choice, but as an identity marker to distinguish Iran from the Sunni Ottoman Empire pressing from the west. Shi'ism becomes the Iranian national identity as much as a religious one. This decision of 1501, you will have understood, is still at work today in the Islamic Republic. Shi'ism in Iran is not merely a faith. It is a civilizational identity built over 5 centuries. But let us return to our central question. How did Persia become Iran? The answer is precise, dated, and surprising. March 21st, 1935. Reza Shah Pahlavi, founder of the last Iranian dynasty before the Islamic Revolution, sends a circular note to all foreign embassies accredited in Tehran. The message is simple. From now on, the official name of the country in foreign languages is no longer Persia. It is Iran. Why this change? Reza Shah is a fierce nationalist. He wants to modernize his country, free it from British and Russian tutelage, restore its national pride. And to do this, he reaches into the deepest roots of Iranian civilization. He finds the word Iran, a modern form of the ancient term Aryana in Sanskrit, meaning the land of the nobles or the land of the Aryans. This term refers directly to the Indo-Iranian peoples of antiquity, the ancestors of the Achaemenids, the builders of Persepolis. In choosing Iran, Reza Shah says something precise to his people and to the world. We are not merely the heirs of the Sasanians or the Safavids. We are the heirs of Cyrus, the heirs of Darius, of a civilization that existed before Alexander, before Rome, before Islam, before everything the West considers the modern world. This name that the world uses today, Iran, is only 90 years old. The country itself is 2,500 years old. And here is the irony that few people grasp. In June 2025, in the midst of open war, Benjamin Netanyahu declares in an interview, "Cyrus liberated the Jews, and today the Jewish state could liberate the Persians." He invokes Cyrus as a moral argument to legitimize a military operation against Iran. He uses the Persian Messiah of the Bible to justify the bombing of his descendants. The same names, the same texts, used as weapons by both sides. What this irony reveals, we will return to. But first, there remains one more biblical text to reread. the one Netanyahu brandished before the United States Congress as proof that the Persians have wanted to destroy the Jews since time immemorial. The Book of Esther. And what you are about to find in it will surprise you. Back to Washington, March 3rd, 2015. Netanyahu stands before the United States Congress. In his left hand, a book, not an intelligence report, not a map of Iranian nuclear installations. A book of the Bible, the Book of Esther. He raises it before the cameras and says this, word for word. Tomorrow night, on the Jewish holiday of Purim, we'll read the Book of Esther. We'll read of a powerful Persian viceroy named Haman, who plotted to destroy the Jewish people some 2,500 years ago. But a courageous Jewish woman, Queen Esther, foiled this plot and gave the Jewish people the right to defend themselves against their enemies. Today, the Jewish people face another attempt by yet another Persian potentate to destroy us. The room applauds. 43 standing ovations that evening. 43. This speech was seen by tens of millions of people. It was analyzed, commented on, quoted. It entered history as one of the most striking addresses ever delivered before the United States Congress, and almost no one asked the obvious question. Is that really what the Book of Esther says? Let us take the time to reread this text, not as a sacred document to be venerated or challenged, as a narrative, with the eyes of an attentive reader who wants to understand what is actually written there. The story takes place in Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire, during the reign of King Ahasuerus, identified by most historians as Xerxes I, who reigned from 486 to 465 before our era. Ahasuerus is therefore Persian. Ahasuerus is therefore the direct ancestor of those whom Iranians today regard as their kings. The enemy is named Haman. Haman is the king's grand vizier, an ambitious, vain man consumed by pride. He harbors a particular hatred for a Jew named Mordecai, who refuses to bow down before him in the streets of Susa. This personal humiliation, a single man who will not bow, gnaws at him to the point where he decides not to content himself with punishing Mordecai. He wants to destroy all the Jews of the empire. All of them, without exception. He obtains from King Ahasuerus permission to send decrees throughout all the provinces, ordering the massacre of the Jewish people on a date fixed in advance. There is the threat. There is Haman. But who is Haman? Where does he come from? The text is precise on this point. Haman is an Agagite, a descendant of Agag, king of the Amalekites, the ancestral enemy of Israel. He is not presented as representative of the Persians. He is not the symbol of Persia. He is a man with a personal history, personal grievances, personal ambition. An individual in a royal court, not a people. And here is what happens next. Esther, a young Jewish woman who has concealed her identity to become Queen of Persia, reveals Haman's plot to Ahasuerus. She tells him the truth. She tells him who she is. And she asks him to save her. People. Ahasuerus listens. Ahasuerus, the Persian king, listens to the Jewish woman he married and loves. He has Haman arrested. He has him hanged on the very gallows Haman had built to hang Mordecai. He grants the Jews the right to defend themselves against their enemies. And Mordecai becomes the new Grand Vizier, the right hand of the Persian king. Let us stop there. Who saves the Jews in this story? The Persian king. Ahasuerus is not the enemy. Ahasuerus is the one who, by listening to a courageous woman, overturns the plot of a wicked man and saves an entire people. Persia, in the book of Esther, is not the executioner. It is not the threat. It is the empire in which a Jewish woman found enough security to become queen. It is the framework in which a king, when told the truth, chooses justice. It is the arena where a wicked man, Haman, was defeated through benevolent Persian power. Netanyahu used as proof of eternal Persian hatred a text in which the Persians
Save the Jews.
This is not a nuance. This is not a subtlety reserved for specialists. It is the heart of the story, the central structure of the narrative, the main argument that no attentive reader can miss. So how is this possible? How can a prime minister, surrounded by advisors, rabbis, and biblical scholars, cite this text before the United States Congress while acting as if Persia were the enemy? The answer is simple, and it reveals something important about the way sacred texts function when they are turned into political weapons. You do not read the text. You use the name. Haman is Persian in the sense that he lives in Persia. He is at the court of a Persian king. He draws his power from a Persian empire. That is enough for, in a quick speech before an audience that does not have the book open in front of them, the association to form. Persia equals Haman. Haman equals enemy of the Jews. Therefore, Persia equals enemy of the Jews. And if someone in the room remembers
That it is the Persian king who saves the Jews, that Esther was queen of Persia, that Ahasuerus hanged Haman and granted the Jews the right to defend themselves, that detail is lost in the applause. This is a mechanism we will examine in detail in a moment. But first, one last piece must be added to this picture: the tomb of Esther and Mordecai. It exists. It is real. And it is located in Hamadan, in western Iran, the ancient Ecbatana, one of the capitals of the Persian Empire. A mausoleum built in the 14th century, mentioned as early as the 12th century by the Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela, who at that time describes a community of 50,000 Jews living in Hamadan. This mausoleum is today listed as part of the cultural heritage of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Iranian state, the state that Netanyahu compares to Haman, officially protects the tomb of the woman who, according to the Bible, saved the Jews from the Persians. And in March 2025, in the midst of open war, images circulated on social media. Iranian Jews in Hamadan, dancing and praying at this tomb on the occasion of Purim, the very festival that Netanyahu had cited before Congress to justify confrontation with Iran. Iranian Jews celebrating Esther in Iran, protected by the Iranian state, while missiles fall 500 kilometers away. The chief rabbi of Iran was reading the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, in Hebrew, before worshippers gathered in this mausoleum, which the government of the Islamic Republic lists as national cultural heritage. Think about what that image contains. A state whose supreme leader calls Israel a cancerous tumor officially protects the tomb of a Jewish queen. Jewish citizens of that state celebrate a Jewish holiday entirely legally on that site. They dance, not in secret, not underground, in plain sight. These two realities exist simultaneously: the war and the dance, the missiles and the prayer.
The official hatred and the human bond that resists. This is not an anecdotal detail. It is the crack in the narrative of eternal hatred, a crack that neither bombs nor speeches have managed to close. Isaiah calls a Persian Messiah. Esther owes her survival to a Persian king. Her tomb is protected by the Iranian state, and Jews dance there during a war. The two great biblical texts about Persia tell the same thing. Not a hatred, a debt, a bond, a shared history that no one has the right to erase in the name of a conflict that has, as we are about to see, only 46 years of age. Because there is something Netanyahu did not say to Congress that evening, something that news channels never show when they talk about Iran and Israel, something that, had you seen it at the time, would have changed your understanding of this conflict from top to bottom. 46 years ago, Iran was Israel's closest ally in the Middle East. May 14th, 1948, Tel Aviv. David.
Ben-Gurion reads the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel before a standing room. 11 minutes later, the United States recognizes the new state. The world holds its breath. At the United Nations, Iran votes against the partition of Palestine and against the creation of Israel. The international press notes the vote. Observers conclude, Iran is in the Arab camp. Iran is hostile to Israel. What they do not see, what almost no one will see for decades, is what happens in the diplomatic back channels in the months that follow. 2 years after that vote against the creation of Israel in 1950, Iran becomes the second Muslim-majority country to officially recognize the Jewish state. The first was Turkey. 2 non-Arab Muslim countries on the periphery of the Arab world, making the same geopolitical calculation at the same moment. And this calculation has a name. It comes from a small, stubborn, visionary man who founds Israel and spends the following years building its survival in a hostile environment. David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion develops what he calls the periphery doctrine. The reasoning is disarmingly simple. Israel is surrounded by Arab states that refuse its existence. These Arab states are its immediate neighbors: Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq. If Israel cannot get along with its direct neighbors, it must build alliances with those beyond them, the states that geographically, in turn, encircle the Arab states, the periphery of the Arab world. Iran is non-Arab. Iran is non-Soviet, at a time when several Arab states are drawing closer to Moscow. Iran is deeply suspicious of the Arab nationalism embodied by Nasser in Egypt, who dreams of Arab unity and worries Tehran as much as Tel Aviv. Iran shares with Israel 2 common enemies: Pan-Arabism and communism. The 2 countries do not need to love each other. They need each other. In 1957, Ben-Gurion travels secretly to Tehran. He meets Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The 2 men immediately understand that they speak the same language, that of geopolitical interests, not rhetoric. The alliance born that day will never be official. It will never be announced in the newspapers. It will never be publicly admitted by Iran, which maintains officially pro-Arab positions so as not to alienate the Shia clergy and popular opinion in the Muslim world. But it will be real, deep, multifaceted. Here are the facts, not suppositions, documented, verified facts today in the archives. Iran becomes Israel's main supplier of oil. At certain moments between 1950 and 1979, Iran supplies up to 60% of the Jewish state's energy needs.
A pipeline connects Eilat on the Red Sea to Ashkelon on the Mediterranean, a joint Israeli-Iranian project completed in 1968. Iranian oil crosses Israel to reach European markets. It is a major industrial cooperation worth several billion dollars. Al operates regular direct flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran. Businessmen, diplomats, engineers, doctors travel in both directions. Iranian students study at Israeli universities. Israeli experts in agriculture, irrigation, and medicine work in Iran. Israeli construction companies participate in Iranian infrastructure projects. In the military and intelligence domains, the cooperation is even closer and even less visible. The Mossad helps train and organize the Shah's secret police. This is an uncomfortable reality, because that secret police is also a brutal organization, responsible for the torture and assassination of political opponents. But in the logic of the Cold War and regional survival, the Mossad and the Shah's secret police exchange information on neighboring Arab countries, on Soviet networks in the region, and on armed Palestinian groups. Between 1949 and 1952, an even more remarkable secret operation unfolds. Tens of thousands of Iraqi Jews want to leave Iraq, where they are increasingly persecuted, to join Israel. The problem: Arab countries refuse all transit. The solution: Iran. Thanks to the Israeli-Iranian understanding, more than 150,000 Iraqi Jews transit clandestinely through Iran to reach Israel. Without this cooperation, this migration was impossible. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, when Arab countries break off their relations with Iran because the Shah does not condemn Israel with sufficient vehemence, Tehran holds firm. The alliance holds. In 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, when Egypt and Syria attack Israel and Arab countries launch the oil embargo against Western countries that support Israel, Iran continues to deliver its oil to Israel, discreetly, but it continues. And in 1977, the two countries launch Project Flower, a joint ballistic missile development program. Iran provides the funding, Israel the technology. The project is halted by the 1979 revolution before it comes to fruition, but it shows how far military cooperation had progressed. Israel owed Iran, at the time of the revolution, approximately $1 billion for deals concluded under these programs, a debt the Jewish state decided, in 1979, not to repay, and on which European courts have ruled in Iran's favor for decades. 31 years. From 1948 to 1979, 31 years of a real, documented, deep alliance. An alliance that neither country ever publicly acknowledged. An alliance that the populations of both countries knew almost nothing about. An alliance of pragmatism, not love, but a real alliance. Then comes 1979. In January of that year, the Shah leaves Iran for an exile from which he will not return. In February, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returns from exile to Tehran after 15 years of absence. The Islamic Revolution takes power. What happens next is of a stunning swiftness. In less than 12 months, the Israeli embassy in Tehran is handed over to representatives of the Palestine Liberation Organization. El Al flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran are cancelled. Iranian oil stops arriving at Eilat. The Shah's secret police is dissolved, its members hunted down, tried, often executed. Khomeini declares Israel an illegitimate regime, a Zionist entity that has no right to exist. In 1 year, 31 years of alliance are erased. Not eroded, not gradually undone, erased. Overnight. By political decision of a new regime that needed an enemy to consolidate its revolution, to unify disparate factions around a common cause, to establish itself as the champion of resistance in the Muslim world. The chosen enemy was called Israel. And the hatred born in 1979, that political, ideological, instrumentalized hatred, would in the years and decades that followed drape itself progressively in the garments of eternity. It would seek justifications in religious texts. It would present itself as ancient, deep, inevitable. It would borrow the face of Haman, the mask of 2,500 years. But you now know what you may never have known before. This hatred has a birth certificate. It is dated February 11th, 1979. It is 46 years old. And if a 46-year-old hatred can present itself as a 2,500-year-old hatred, if a recent political conflict can borrow the garb of religious destiny, then we must understand how this mechanism works. Not to excuse, to see, to no longer be deceived. That is what we are going to do now. Let us ask the question directly. How do you transform 46 years of political rupture into 2,500 years of religious hatred? This is not a mystery. This is not a secret conspiracy reserved for a handful of initiates. It is a technique, an ancient, documented, reproducible technique. A technique that historians, political scientists, and psychologists have described with precision. And once you see it, once you understand how it works, you can no longer not see it. Everywhere, all the time. It rests on 3 steps. The first step: choose the useful texts. Ignore the rest. You have just read Cyrus. You have just reread Esther. 2 texts that tell the same thing. The Persians as allies, as saviors, as benevolent. 2 texts that frontally contradict the idea of an ancestral religious hatred between Persians and Jews. These texts exist. They are in the Bible. They have always been there. It is enough simply not to cite them. Netanyahu cites Haman. He does not cite Cyrus. He cites the vizier who wanted to kill the Jews. He does not cite the king who saved them. He cites the plot. He does not cite the decree of liberation. He takes from a 12-chapter text exactly what he needs, a wicked Persian, and leaves aside everything that same text says about Persian benevolence. This is not an error, it is a selection. And on the other side, Khomeini does exactly the same thing in the opposite direction. He cites the verses that speak of conflict between Jews and non-Jews. He cites texts that can be read as calls to resistance against oppression. He ignores everything Islam says about the protection of the people of the book, about respect for Jewish prophets, about coexistence. He selects. He carves from the text what he needs to justify what he has already decided. That is the first step. The sacred text as a quarry where you extract the useful stones and leave the rest underground. The second step: date the hatred as far back as possible. 46 years can be negotiated. 46 years can be undone. 46 years, a politician can decide, is enough. That interests have changed, that a new page is possible. 2,500 years is different. 2,500 years is before history. It is before modern nations. It is inscribed in something that resembles human nature, destiny, divine will. 2,500 years cannot be negotiated. It cannot be undone. It does not change. That is precisely why the reference goes back to Haman, not to Khomeini, not to 1979, not to the overthrow of a 30-year alliance by a political revolution. No, to Haman, to the Persian Empire, to 5 centuries before our era. Because the older it is, the more inevitable it seems. The more religious it is, the more impossible to question without appearing impious. The hatred fabricated in 1979 borrows the clothes of 539 before our era. It disguises itself as eternity. The third step: make the enemy necessary. This is the most subtle and the most powerful. There is one sentence that alone summarizes everything we are about to say. It comes from an analysis published in an academic journal on contemporary Israeli-Iranian relations. It says this: Israel and Iran have become necessary enemies for each other. Think about what that means. Iran needs Israel as an enemy. Since 1979, the Islamic Republic has been built on a number of ideological pillars: anti-imperialism, resistance against the West, the defense of the Palestinian cause. Without a Zionist enemy to fight, without a little Satan to designate, the expression is Khomeini's, the great Satan being the United States, a part of the regime's ideological cohesion collapses. The enemy is not a problem to be solved. It is a political resource to be maintained. Israel needs Iran as an enemy. The Iranian threat justifies colossal military budgets. It justifies American military aid. It justifies a certain diplomatic impunity. You do not press too hard on a country facing an existential threat. It allows a diverse Israeli population to be federated around a common danger. And it allows international attention to be diverted from otherwise more embarrassing domestic issues. 2 regimes, 2 necessary enemies. Each needs the other to exist as it is. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is elementary geopolitics. Leaders are not necessarily cynical in the sense of telling themselves, "I am going to fabricate an enemy to use." They are often sincerely convinced. But sincerity changes nothing about the mechanics. Sincere hatred is just as politically useful as calculated hatred. Now the psychological question. Why does it work? Why do millions of people, intelligent, educated people with access to information, believe in a 2,500-year-old hatred that is not yet 46 years old? The answer lies in something psychologists call terror management theory. It was developed in the 1980s by researchers Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pyshinsky, building on the work of anthropologist Ernest Becker. The central idea is simple. Human beings are the only animals who know they are going to die. This awareness of death is a source of permanent, deep, existential anxiety that we manage by clinging to systems of meaning, cultures, religions, nations, collective identities that give us the sense of participating in something greater than ourselves, something that will survive our individual death. And when this anxiety is activated, when a leader reminds his people that they are threatened, that enemies want to annihilate them, that the very survival of the group is at stake, the defense mechanisms of collective identity trigger automatically. The group closes ranks. Distrust of the outside increases. Critical thinking suspends itself. the leader's claims are no longer questioned. Because the leader protects us. Because questioning his version of events in a moment of danger resembles treason. That is why leaders who want to keep a population in a state of permanent mobilization have an interest in maintaining a sense of existential threat. Not necessarily a real threat, a perceived threat, a narrated threat, a threat dressed in eternity. They have wanted to destroy us since always. That sentence activates something very deep in the human brain, something that precedes reason, something that short-circuits analysis. And notice something. This mechanism is not specific to this conflict. It is universal. You find it everywhere in history. The Crusaders who went to deliver Jerusalem believed they were fighting a millennial threat against Christendom. The Spanish conquistadors who evangelized the Americas believed they were fulfilling a divine mission traced from all eternity. The European nationalists of the 19th century, who built their narratives of purity and destiny, believed they were defending identities as old as the world. The mechanism is the same. Always. Take a recent conflict. Dress it in ancient texts. Date it as far back as possible. Make the enemy necessary. And add the existential threat to activate the psychological mechanisms that suspend doubt. You obtain a hatred that seems eternal, because it looks as though it has always been there. A hatred that seems impossible to undo because it appears inscribed in the nature of things. A hatred that seems religious because it speaks the language of the sacred. But this is not eternity. It is politics. This is not the sacred. It is technique. And a technique can be dismantled. Once you see it, it loses some of its power. Not all of its power. The psychological mechanisms are deep, and real fear does not disappear because its origins have been understood. But something changes. A crack appears. A doubt sets in. And sometimes a doubt is enough. Because in Hamadan, in March 2025, while missiles were falling, Iranian Jews were dancing. And that image says something that neither bombs nor speeches can erase. Hamadan, Western Iran, March 2025. The strikes of the 12-day war began a few days ago. Sirens sound in Iranian cities. Israeli missiles have targeted military installations, nuclear sites, and Revolutionary Guard headquarters. Tehran retaliates. Drones cross the night in both directions. Generals are killed in their offices. Nuclear scientists disappear. And in Hamadan, 500 kilometers southwest of Tehran, men and women dance. They dance on the tomb of Esther and Mordecai. They sing. They pray. It is Purim, the very festival that Netanyahu cited before the United States Congress 10 years earlier to speak of the eternal Persian enemy. And Iranian Jews are celebrating it in Iran, on Iranian soil, protected by the Iranian state, while the war rages. The images circulated on social media. The chief rabbi of Iran was reading the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, in Hebrew, before worshippers gathered in this mausoleum, which the government of the Islamic Republic lists as national cultural heritage. Think about what that image contains. A state whose supreme leader calls Israel a cancerous tumor officially protects the tomb of a Jewish queen. Jewish citizens of that state celebrate a Jewish holiday entirely legally on that site. They dance, not in secret, not underground, in plain sight. There are approximately 25,000 Jews still living in Iran today. Before the Islamic Revolution of 1979, they were nearly 100,000. Many left after the revolution, but many stayed. And some who left have come back, because Iran is their country, because their ancestors have lived there since Cyrus, since 2,500 years ago. The Jewish community of Iran is the oldest Jewish community in the world outside Israel. It is unbroken since Cyrus's decree in 539 before our era. It has survived the Achaemenids, the Parthians, the Sasanians, the Arab conquest, Mongols, the Safavids, the Qajars, the Pahlavis, and the Islamic Revolution. In Isfahan, there is a Jewish synagogue built centuries ago. It stands a few streets from a mosque called Al-Aqsa. The two buildings have coexisted in the same neighborhood for generations. Their worshippers cross paths in the same streets, shop in the same markets. Daily life has a logic that official discourse does not entirely govern. In Tehran, the Dr. Sapir Hospital has been run by the Jewish community for decades. It treats everyone, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, without distinction. In the midst of the Islamic Republic, in the midst of war with Israel. These realities do not refute the violence. They do not say that everything is fine. They do not say that the Jews of Iran live freely, without constraint, without fear. That would be false. They live with real restrictions: prohibition from holding certain positions, the obligation of discretion about their political opinions concerning Israel, the permanent fragility of their status. But these realities say something else, something important. They say that the human bond between peoples resists, that it resists revolutions, ideologies, wars, official hate speech, that 2,500 years of coexistence are not erased in 46 years, even when the bombs fall. And this is where I want to stop with you. Not to give another history lesson, not to analyze one more mechanism, but to ask a question that this history makes impossible to avoid. If violence led to peace, then peace would have reigned for millennia in this world. Let that sentence sink in. Millennia of wars, millennia of crusades, of jihad, of conquests, of reprisals, of vengeances, of cycles that close back in on themselves. Millennia during which each side sincerely believed that striking hard enough, long enough, precisely enough would finally settle the matter, would finally create security, would finally produce peace. And peace is not here. This is not a naive pacifist opinion. This is not a call for capitulation. It is an empirical observation. If the method worked, we would know it. If violence had the power to resolve what politics cannot, history would bear proof of it. It does not. It bears the opposite. Proof that each cycle of violence generates the next, but each act of vengeance creates the next injustice to be avenged, that the spiral has no visible bottom. So where does this belief come from that violence is natural, that war is inevitable, that human beings are fundamentally driven to destroy one another? It comes from what we were taught, not from what we are. Think about what this story has shown you tonight. Two peoples whose founding texts tell of a friendship. Two states that were allies for 31 years. A Jewish community that has lived in Iran for 2,500 years, unbroken through everything history could inflict. people who dance on.
A tomb during a war.
This is not utopia. This is history. This is what exists, what has existed, what continues to exist, in spite of everything. Violence is not in our deep nature. It is in what we have been taught to believe about our nature. And this belief, this idea that the other is fundamentally an enemy, that difference is a threat, that suspicion is the only wisdom, this belief sustains itself, transmits itself, reinforces itself with each generation. It reinforces itself too, sometimes, in the comments under videos like this one. Someone watches this video. They disagree with something, a date, an interpretation, a conclusion. That is legitimate. That is even desirable. Truth is built through debate, not imposed consensus. But look at what often happens. Instead of writing, "I disagree and here is why," the person insults. They attack. They say things they would never say face to face. Keyboard violence replaces argument. The hatred of a comment replaces thought. Why? Because they were taught, not explicitly but deeply, that difference is an aggression, that someone who thinks differently is an enemy, that the response to what unsettles us is attack, not dialogue. It is the same mechanism, at a different scale, between individuals rather than between states, but it is the same mechanism, the one that transforms difference into threat, and threat into violence. There is a distinction I would like to leave with you tonight. A simple distinction, but one whose consequences are immense if we truly decide to practice it. Listening to understand, or listening to respond. When we listen to respond, we are not truly listening. We are waiting. We are looking for the flaw, the mistake, the point to attack. We are preparing our counter-argument while the other person is still speaking. We do not hear what they are saying. We hear what we decided they were going to say. When we listen to understand, something different happens. We suspend judgment. We let the other person's words truly enter. We ask ourselves, where does this position come from? What experience formed it? What do I not yet know about what they are living? This is not weakness. It is the most difficult act there is. Far more difficult than insulting, far more difficult than attacking. Understanding someone we disagree with demands a strength that violence does not demand. Accepting differences does not mean accepting everything the other does or says. It does not mean indifference or capitulation. It means recognizing that the other has the right to exist differently. That their difference is not a threat to your identity. That you can maintain your convictions without needing to destroy theirs. This world is rich in its differences, not despite them, because of them. Iranian Jews dancing on the tomb of Esther during a war between Iran and Israel. This is not an anecdote. It is a lesson. A lesson about what peoples do when no one is giving them orders. When no one is watching. When politics recedes for a moment and what remains is the human. The human dances. The hatred between Iran and Israel is not in the Bible. It was put into the Bible by men who needed it at a precise moment in time for reasons you can now name. What has been constructed can be deconstructed. What has been learned can be unlearned. This is not inevitable. Nothing in this story was inevitable. Nothing in yours either. If you have made it this far, if you have spent these 50 minutes with me, you are part of a rare audience. An audience that does not skim. An audience that embraces complexity. an audience that prefers to understand rather than consume. This type of content, long, sourced, rigorous, refusing shortcuts, is disappearing. Algorithms do not favor it. Short formats dominate. Attention fragments. An hour on the biblical origins of a conflict that is bleeding across our screens. This is not what platforms want to promote. And yet, here you are. So do something simple. Subscribe to this channel, not out of habit, not out of politeness, but because it is an act. An act that says, depth has value, rigor deserves to exist, uncomfortable truth deserves to be heard. And if this video has changed something in the way you see this conflict, if it has opened a door, shifted a certainty, raised a question you were not asking before, share it. Not to convince, to open. Because truth, once transmitted, can no longer be contained. Now there is something even more important than subscribing. Your children. Your grandchildren. The young people growing up today in a world where conflicts are broadcast live on their phones, where images of missiles and heads of states' speeches scroll by between two cat videos, where they are told that certain hatreds are ancient, inevitable, inscribed in the sacred texts and in the nature of things. They are going to need what you have just learned, more than you, faster than you learned it. Because the mechanism we examined together tonight, taking a 46-year conflict, dressing it in 2,500 years of hatred, giving it the face of the sacred so that it is no longer questioned. This mechanism is not going to disappear. It will refine itself. It will grow more sophisticated. In a world where fabricated images make the true and the false indistinguishable, where algorithms personalize what each person sees and believes, where an image can travel the world before anyone has had time to verify what it shows. In that world, knowing how to recognize when a sacred text is being transformed into a political weapon is no longer an intellectual curiosity. It is a survival skill. You may no longer be here to guide them when these manipulations become even more powerful. But you can pass on to them what this investigation has passed on to you. Not certainties, tools. The capacity to ask the right questions. Who fabricated this narrative? When? Who does it serve? What does it erase in order to exist? What alliance, what reality, what shared history was decided you would not be shown? Because tonight, you saw how it works. You saw a biblical text cited to prove a hatred, and you read that text, and you understood that it says exactly the opposite. You saw 31 years of alliance erased in 12 months and presented as a millennial hatred. You saw people dance on a tomb during a war. This tool, this capacity to look at what you are given and search for what is being hidden from you, is perhaps the most precious thing you can bequeath. Not positions, not camps, not reassuring certainties that confine, but the habit of asking the next question. Back to Washington, March 3rd, 2015. Netanyahu stands before the United States Congress, the Book of Esther in his hand. 43 standing ovations. His words resonate through the chamber. The Persians have wanted to destroy the Jews for 2,500 years. You now know what that speech did not say. It did not say that the only foreigner in all of Hebrew scripture to receive the title of Messiah is a Persian king. It did not say that this Persian king liberated the Jews, funded their temple, restored their sacred treasures. It did not say that the Book of Esther itself, the very book he held in his hand, tells the story of a Persian king who saves
the Jews. It did not say that the enemy's name is Haman, not Persia. It did not say that for 31 years, from 1948 to 1979, Iran was Israel's closest ally in the Middle East. It did not say that the hatred he described as millennial was 46 years old. Not one more. The Bible says something other than what you were told it says. History says something other than what you were told it says. And the men and women who dance on the tomb of Esther and Hamadan during a war, they know. Not in words, with their feet, on that ancient earth, in that country that was called Persia when Cyrus changed the world. Truth does not descend from above. It is built here below, by those who refuse to believe without verifying, by those who ask the next question, by those who know, as you now know, that what we are given to believe and what is true are not always the same thing. But there remains one question this video has not asked. How did the Jews end up in Babylon in the first place? What happened there during those 50 years of captivity? And why did that period transform forever their way of seeing themselves, of believing, of surviving? There is a video that answers this. It tells the story of the Babylonian exile in all its depth, and it introduces you to a young lens grinder from Amsterdam who came close to dying 2,000 years later for having understood what truly happened there. It appears just to the right of your screen. And never forget, do not take my word for it. Always verify.